They called it impossible. German generals laughed when they heard the report. 3 American divisions turning 90 degrees in the middle of the deadliest winter of World War II? Through snow, ice, traffic jams, and active combat zones? In just 48 hours? To the German High Command it sounded insane. To General George S. Patton it was already happening. December 19, 1944. Deep inside Allied headquarters, Patton stunned every commander in the room with a promise so outrageous that even American officers doubted him. While Hitler's Ardennes offensive tore through Belgium and trapped the 101st Airborne at Bastogne, Patton calmly declared he could rip 3 entire divisions out of active combat, spin them north, and smash into the German flank within 2 days. The Germans intercepted fragments of the plan almost immediately, and their reaction was pure disbelief. Inside Army Group B headquarters, Field Marshal Walter Model reportedly waved off the intelligence as American propaganda. According to staff accounts, he sneered that Patton was trying to be in 2 places at once. German commanders had built the entire Battle of the Bulge around one assumption: the Allies would be too slow to react. They believed bureaucracy, weather, and logistics would paralyze the Americans for at least a week. Patton was about to destroy that assumption forever. At OKW headquarters, Colonel General Alfred Jodl studied the intercepts with growing confusion. His notes described the maneuver as operational fantasy. German planners calculated the movement should take 2 weeks minimum under winter conditions. Roads were frozen. Fuel lines were collapsing. Visibility was near zero. No modern army had ever attempted a massive armored pivot like this during an active enemy offensive. Even Heinz Guderian, mastermind of Germany's Blitzkrieg doctrine, reportedly refused to believe it. If Patton succeeds, he allegedly admitted, then everything we know about armored warfare must be reconsidered. That statement mattered, because Guderian understood mobility better than almost anyone alive. And Patton was about to move faster than the Germans thought humanly possible. German field commanders along the southern sector of the Bulge were still focused westward, expecting Allied counterattacks days later. Reserves were thin. Defensive positions were incomplete. Many units had not even turned their artillery south because Berlin insisted Patton couldn't arrive in time. That mistake would become catastrophic. Then came December 21st. And suddenly the impossible became visible. German reconnaissance aircraft flying through breaks in the snowstorm spotted endless American vehicle columns pushing north through icy roads. Tanks, half-tracks, fuel trucks, artillery. Entire divisions moving like a steel river through the blizzard. Intercepted radio traffic confirmed the nightmare. Patton wasn't bluffing. At Army Group B headquarters, panic began replacing confidence. General Hans Krebs later described Model pacing furiously across the command bunker demanding answers from intelligence officers. "How is this possible?" he reportedly shouted. "How are the Americans doing in 2 days what should require 2 weeks?" German logisticians ran the numbers again and again. Nothing made sense. Over 130,000 troops were being redeployed in conditions that should have frozen movement entirely. Roads were jammed with retreating civilians, damaged vehicles, and snowdrifts. Fuel consumption alone should have crippled the operation. Yet somehow Patton's Third Army kept moving. Faster. Closer. Relentless. For German commanders, the psychological shock was devastating. The Battle of the Bulge depended on speed and surprise. Hitler believed the Allies would collapse under confusion long enough for German armor to split their lines and seize Antwerp. But Patton's maneuver shattered that timeline. Suddenly, German officers realized they were no longer attacking a disorganized enemy. They were about to collide with one of the most aggressive commanders of the war. On December 22nd, fear spread through German communications. Frontline officers reported growing American pressure on the southern flank. Artillery fire intensified. Armored probes appeared where no major Allied force was supposed to exist yet. One German officer reportedly described the situation with a single word: unmöglich. Impossible. But the impossible had arrived. By December 26th, Patton's spearheads smashed through to Bastogne, linking up with the surrounded 101st Airborne and shattering German hopes of holding the encirclement. To many German commanders, this moment marked the death of Hitler's final offensive. Field Marshal von Rundstedt later admitted the speed of the American response shocked the German command structure completely. Post-war interrogations revealed multiple officers believed Patton's maneuver was one of the greatest operational achievements of the entire war. The Germans had spent years terrifying Europe with Blitzkrieg. Now they were watching an American general move faster than they thought possible. And in the frozen forests of the Ardennes, German confidence began collapsing long before their armies did. 11,000 vehicles, tanks, artillery, ammunition, fuel, supplies. Moving an entire army through frozen roads and blinding snow should have been impossible. Yet General George S. Patton was doing exactly that. German intelligence officers could barely believe the reports arriving from the front. One quartermaster officer wrote in frustration, "Either the Americans have developed supernatural powers, or our understanding of logistics is fundamentally flawed." The psychological shock inside German headquarters was immediate. The entire Ardennes offensive had been built on one critical assumption: the Allies would react slowly. German commanders believed the Americans would need at least a week, maybe longer, to reorganize and counterattack. But suddenly that assumption was collapsing in real time. If Patton could rotate 3 divisions 90 degrees, march them through a winter storm, and launch a major offensive within days, then what else were the Americans capable of? General Otto von Mansteufel was among the first German commanders to understand the danger. Commanding the 5th Panzer Army, he urgently warned Field Marshal Walter Model, "If Third Army attacks our southern flank while we are extended westward, our spearheads will be isolated." He demanded either an immediate acceleration toward the Meuse River or the construction of defensive positions to the south. But accelerating was impossible. German spearheads were already bogged down by fierce American resistance around Bastogne and Saint-Vith. Worse still, German fuel reserves were collapsing. Hitler's offensive had depended on capturing Allied fuel depots, but stubborn American defenders had prevented it. German tanks were literally running out of fuel while Patton somehow kept an entire army moving through a blizzard. The irony was devastating. Colonel Hans von Luck later admitted, "We began to realize we were fighting an enemy we had underestimated. The Americans we considered amateurs were now outmaneuvering us with an operational flexibility we could no longer match." By December 22, German concern turned into panic. Patton's forces were not merely moving north, they were forming for a full-scale attack. This was no deception, no propaganda. It was real. And German High Command had no prepared response. At 6 a.m. on December 22, 1944, Patton's 4th Armored Division smashed into German positions along the southern flank of the Bulge. The shock was total. German commanders who believed they still had several days to prepare suddenly found themselves under a massive American armored assault barely 72 hours after Patton had announced his plan. At the headquarters of the German 7th Army, chaos erupted. General Erich Brandenberger sent frantic reports to Army Group B. Under heavy attack from American armor. Multiple divisions. This is not a probe. This is a major offensive. Patton has actually done it. Field Marshal Model reportedly stared at the incoming reports in disbelief. According to command logs, he repeatedly demanded confirmation. Confirm this is Third Army. Confirm Patton himself is directing the attack. How is this possible? When confirmation arrived, Model allegedly threw down his baton and declared, "We are fighting a genius." German soldiers on the front lines were equally stunned. Lieutenant Hans Schmidt later wrote in his diary, "The Americans appeared out of the snowstorm like ghosts. We were told they could not possibly arrive for days. Yet there they were in overwhelming strength." He described Patton's men as attacking with terrifying speed and coordination, fighting like men possessed. Back in Berlin, the atmosphere inside Hitler's headquarters darkened rapidly. Adolf Hitler had personally promised that the Americans would not be able to respond effectively to the Ardennes offensive. He predicted at least 10 days before any serious counterattack could begin. Patton shattered that prediction in less than 3. Hitler refused to accept the truth. He blamed intelligence officers. He blamed field commanders. He blamed weakness and incompetence. Anything except the reality staring him in the face. An American general had completely outthought German operational planning. But Germany's professional officers understood exactly what had happened. General Gunther Blumentritt later wrote, "Patton's relief of Bastogne was one of the most brilliant operational achievements of the war. To disengage from combat, move 3 divisions through winter conditions, and launch a coordinated attack within 48 hours required a level of staff work and command excellence beyond anything we achieved, even in 1940. As Patton's attack gained momentum, the entire southern flank of the German offensive began to collapse. Units that were supposed to be driving west toward the Meuse River were suddenly fighting desperately just to survive against Third Army's assault. The carefully planned German timetable disintegrated. Patton's offensive did more than relieve Bastogne. It shattered the operational logic behind the entire Ardennes offensive. Then, on December 26, Patton's 4th Armored Division finally broke through to Bastogne. At that moment, German High Command faced a brutal truth: the offensive had failed. Not simply because of American resistance. Not simply because of fuel shortages. It failed because Patton had accomplished something German planners believed was impossible. On December 27, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt gathered his commanders for a grim conference. Captured meeting records later revealed the depth of German alarm. Von Rundstedt opened the meeting with a devastating assessment. "We based our entire strategy on the assumption that Allied response would be slow, disorganized, and reactive. Patton has proven that assumption catastrophically wrong." He admitted that Germany was no longer fighting the hesitant Allied armies of earlier years. Now they faced an enemy capable of matching, and even exceeding, German speed and operational flexibility. The strategic implications were enormous. If the Americans could redeploy entire divisions with such speed, then German operational secrecy meant nothing. Surprise offensives, the very foundation of German Blitzkrieg doctrine, could no longer guarantee success. German panzer commanders took the humiliation personally. General Heinrich Freiherr von Luttwitz bitterly admitted, "We created mobile armored warfare. We wrote the doctrine of rapid maneuver. Now an American general is using our own methods against us, and doing it better." Inside Hitler's headquarters, denial continued. Hitler demanded the offensive continue. More attacks. More sacrifices. More determination. But his senior commanders already knew the truth. Model. Manschufel. Von Rundstedt. All privately understood the Ardennes offensive was doomed. Patton's relief of Bastogne had changed everything. It proved that American forces could react faster than German armies could exploit breakthroughs. And perhaps most damaging of all, it shattered German propaganda. For years, German soldiers had been told the Americans were poorly led, inexperienced, and militarily inferior. Patton's achievement destroyed that illusion forever. German troops who had marched across Europe with confidence in 1940 and 1941 were now facing a very different enemy in the winter of 1944. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes, they encountered an American commander who could think faster, move harder, and strike more aggressively than they believed possible. From December 26 onward, many German commanders already understood the truth. The Battle of the Bulge might continue for weeks, but the war's final German offensive had failed the moment General George S. Patton broke through to Bastogne. What happened was more than a successful rescue mission. Patton's astonishing 48-hour pivot of the Third Army shattered the momentum of Hitler's last gamble in the West. It proved that the American army had evolved into a military force capable of matching, and in many cases surpassing, the operational brilliance Germany had once dominated Europe with. After Germany surrendered in May 1945, Allied intelligence officers began extensive interrogations of captured German commanders. Again and again conversations returned to one event, Patton's relief of Bastogne. These were not excuses from defeated men. These were experienced professional soldiers trying to understand how they had been so completely outmaneuvered. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the German Armed Forces High Command, reportedly admitted during interrogation that Germany had made a catastrophic mistake by underestimating American military capability. "We believed our own propaganda," he confessed. "We convinced ourselves that the Americans lacked operational skill." Patton destroyed that illusion. Moving an entire army through a blizzard and launching a coordinated attack within 48 hours was an achievement we could no longer match by 1944. Perhaps Germany could have done such a thing in 1940 at the peak of our strength. By late 1944, that capability was gone. Patton still possessed it, or perhaps the Americans had finally mastered it themselves. General Otto von Manschufel, one of Germany's most respected armored commanders, viewed Patton's achievement through a more analytical lens. According to post-war accounts, he believed Patton understood the most important principle of modern warfare: speed controls the battlefield. Patton never waited for perfect conditions, Manschufel observed. He acted decisively with incomplete information and forced the enemy to react to him. That is how Germany won its early victories. By 1944 we had become cautious, defensive, and slow. Patton remained aggressive and unpredictable. That difference decided the outcome. Even Field Marshal Walter Model, the commander directly opposing Patton during the Ardennes campaign, reportedly acknowledged the brilliance of the operation before his death in April 1945. If Germany had commanders capable of Patton's speed and flexibility, Model told members of his staff, we might have won the war. Our early victories made us arrogant. We trusted doctrine more than execution. Patton proved that execution matters more than theory, and his execution was flawless. Perhaps the most remarkable reaction came from General Heinz Guderian, the architect of Germany's Blitzkrieg doctrine itself. Earlier in the war, Guderian had supposedly dismissed reports that Patton could rotate and redeploy an army so quickly. The logistics alone seemed impossible. Yet after the war, Guderian reportedly admitted his disbelief had been shattered. "I did not think it could be done," he said. "The logistics should have taken a week. The winter road should have caused chaos. The attack should have arrived in fragments and confusion." Instead, Patton achieved near-perfect coordination. His staff work was exceptional. His field commanders executed brilliantly. His supply officers performed miracles. This was not luck. It was operational excellence at every level. German military historians in the decades after the war echoed the same respect. General Hans Speidel later described the relief of Bastogne as one of the greatest demonstrations of operational art in modern military history. "The relief of Bastogne should be studied at every war college," Speidel wrote. Not only because of what Patton achieved, but because of how flawlessly an entire army executed under impossible conditions. But perhaps the most honest judgment came not from generals, but from ordinary German soldiers sitting in prisoner-of-war camps after the war. Many remembered Patton's sudden attack as the exact moment they realized Germany would lose. One former panzer officer later recalled, "When Patton turned his army in the middle of a blizzard and attacked within 2 days, we knew the war was over. Not just that battle, the war itself. We no longer had the leadership, speed, or capability to compete against an enemy that could move like that." For years, German high command had dismissed Patton as a loud, theatrical American commander famous for his ivory-handled revolvers and dramatic speeches. But Bastogne forced them to confront the truth. Patton was far more than a showman. He was one of the most dangerous operational commanders of the Second World War, a man capable of achieving what even Germany's finest generals considered impossible. The relief of Bastogne became more than a battlefield victory. It became proof that the balance of military excellence had shifted. Germany, once the master of fast-moving warfare, had been surpassed by the very army it mocked at the beginning of the war. And that is why the German reaction to Patton's achievement remains so powerful today. These were not compliments from admirers. They were admissions from defeated enemies who understood exactly what military greatness looked like when they saw it. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the German High Command's reaction to Patton's impossible maneuver, make sure to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II. This channel explores the hidden perspectives behind history's greatest battles, the decisions, rivalries, and moments that changed the course of the war forever. Leave a comment below and tell us what topic you want explored next. The German perspective on the defense of Bastogne, the story of the 101st Airborne holding the line, Hitler's final gamble during the Battle of the Bulge, intelligence failures that allowed the surprise attack, Patton's rivalry with Montgomery and Eisenhower. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and share it with anyone who loves real military history told from both sides of the battlefield. Because sometimes the impossible is only impossible until someone actually does it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.